You're listening to the Uptime Wind Energy Podcast, brought to you by BuildTurbines.com. Learn, train, and be a part of the clean energy revolution. Visit BuildTurbines.com today. Now here's your hosts, Alan Hall, Joel Saxum, Phil Totaro, and Rosemary Barnes.
Well, welcome to the Uptime Wind Energy Podcast. I'm Alan Hall from the Queen City, Charlotte, North Carolina. Joel Saxum is down in Texas, and Phil Totaro of Intelstor is in Cali. Phil, you had a tsunami alert just recently. Did you see any waves in your neighborhood?
No, because it didn't actually amount to anything.
And that's good, right? Have you had tsunami warnings like that in the past?
Yes, and actually more serious ones from earthquakes that are smaller than the 8.8 that was in Russia that caused this one. But we've had earthquakes off the coast of California where, they're like 4 point something or 5 something, and that actually triggers a tsunami warning that's potentially more serious because of the close proximity. So we actually developed in California an early detection and warning system that is triggered, mobile phone alerts and updates based on the detection of the P waves from an earthquake.
What's a P wave?
P wave is down, shear wave is left and right. So shear wave would be moving this way, P wave would be moving up and down.
The P waves are the first indication on, for the U.S. Geological Survey, they've got those things that, monitor the vibration of the earth or whatever it is that they're monitoring. A P wave will be the first thing triggered when there's an actual earthquake. That's the thing that happens fast, like super fast, and they can detect it. Anyway, so we've developed an early warning system when we have issues, and inclusive of tsunami warnings. But I'm kind of 300 feet up, so I have less to worry about.
It's a good place to be. Well, there's some offshore warnings off the coast of Germany because they held their latest offshore wind auction. And it's for about 2.5 gigawatts of capacity and about 180 square kilometers of water. And they didn't have any bidders at all, 0 bidders. And the industry from Wind Europe to the German Offshore Wind Association are saying, like, yeah, no one's going to bid on these things because there's too much risk and there's negative bidding, quote unquote, negative bidding, which means that you have to pay money for the rights to build out the wind farm. And everybody in at least Germany and Wind Europe is saying that CFD, contract for difference, is the way to go. And until Germany switches over to a CFD model, you're going to continue to have no bidders. Now, Phil, this is a big problem because Germany is planning to develop a significant amount of offshore wind, gigawatts worth, many gigawatts worth by 2030. Is there going to be a change into the German auction system? Will they move to a CFD?
We certainly hope so, because what they've been doing up to this point with, trying to attract like 0 subsidy bids is clearly not working. Germany's economy minister came out after the auction result and said, well, we'll have to look at this and why that happened. Were the designed areas actually appropriate? And did we consider the potential risks for developers? Were they underestimated? Well, yes, they were, first of all, and there was nothing wrong with the design areas of the 10.1 and 10.2 that they were trying to auction off. It's the fact that, in a high interest rate environment, nobody's going to want to make a 0 subsidy bid on something where they're not going to necessarily be guaranteed the PPA that they need. And when you're not willing to guarantee them the PPA in advance of the auction, that's one part of it. The other part is that, with uncertainty and risk associated with, access to supply chain components and things like that, you've got countries like Germany and the EU in general saying that they want to wean themselves off of China and Chinese parts. Well, good luck with that, first of all. Second, if you're going to domesticate everything, that's necessarily going to raise the cost. So you've got to be in a position to accept a higher price and give, if you're the government, you have to be able to give some kind of certainty.
I'd love for someone from that. How do I say this? Like not organization, but from that area, from who's been involved in this, to reach out to the podcast, because what I'd like to be a fly on the wall, because this is what I don't understand. Germany, big wind market onshore, big wind market offshore, large player in wind in general, right? Big companies over there. We got RWE over there that has done a lot of offshore things. Like, where was the consultation between the government and trade groups, organizations? Because like there should be a feedback mechanism in the early stages of planning this that says, hey, potential suitors, what do you think about this process? Will it work? And I have to imagine that they all emailed back and said, this isn't going to work for me. I don't know though, right? So I'd love to hear from someone involved in that process to be able to kind of share with us, this is how it went, because we've watched it happen now time and time again. There was another one of these not too long ago. Denmark had the one that had basically 0 subscribers, right? So, hey, governments, you have a great trade organization over there, Wind Europe. You have a lot of players local to you. It's not like you're trying to figure this out blindly. Why not collaborate?
Oh, yeah, that's totally true. We had just had Mads Vidoy and Anders Nash on, who were talking about the Utsira Nord project up in Norway, and that's going through a bidding process sort of starting now. It's in September, it really gets serious. But even there's a significant number of changes that are happening and companies that are dropping out because they're raising the stakes and trying to get companies that have a lot of offshore wind experience and not bring somebody new into the game where they're going to make mistakes. They figure if you have developed, was it 200 megawatts or 500 megawatts, Joel, offshore already? It was some significant number.
I think it was 500.
I mean, if there was any way that they could try and make this about we only want to work with Equinor, that's basically what they're trying to do. I mean, yeah, sure, but if Simply Blue Group comes in there and says that they want to be able to develop, if Statkraft, who had previously been involved in that, was in there and then pulled out because they weren't getting the guarantees from the Norwegian government either. This is kind of the systematic issue within Europe at the moment anyway, because they're the ones talking about, well, we want to wean ourselves off of Russian gas. Well, then do it. Don't sit there and say you can only do it if you're doing it with, 18,000 criteria in place. Make it easy for the developers, and the money will flow. Investors will want to plow money into, the development of these projects, but get out of your own way and make it happen.
It's kind of reminiscent to me, I guess this is for our U.S. listeners. I was reading an article today about the no offense, Phil, but the flight out of California. It was the amount of people leaving there, and it was a letter written from a CEO of a development company that was saying basically it's the hardest place in the United States to do business, and businesses are leaving in droves. People are leaving in droves. It was last year, 920,000 people left the state of California, a net loss.
Wow.
Yeah, it was crazy. There's 55 million people there, but to lose basically 2% of your population in 1 year, that's crazy. But the reason being is it's the hardest place to do business in the United States. There's barriers all the time. There's permitting issues. There's this, there's that for real estate development, companies, taxes, all this stuff that makes things difficult. Taxes is a big one, right? But that's what this to me looks like over in the EU right now. Is you're making it difficult for people to do. And no wonder why people don't want to do it. They're going to look for the easiest place to stick their capital, or the easiest and safest place to stick their capital.
Are you worried about unexpected blade root failures and the high cost of repairs? Meet EcoPitch by Onyx Insight, the standard in blade root monitoring. Onyx's state-of-the-art sensor tracks blade root movement in real time, delivering continuous data to keep your wind farm running smoothly and efficiently. With EcoPitch, you can catch problems early, saving hundreds of thousands of dollars. Field tested on over 3,000 blades, it's proven reliability at your fingertips. Choose EcoPitch for peace of mind. Contact Onyx Insight today to schedule your demo of EcoPitch and experience the future of blade monitoring. Well, India has implemented new sweeping regulations that will shape the global wind turbine supply chain for at least a little while. The Ministry of New and Renewable Energy now requires all wind turbine manufacturers to source key components, including blades, towers, generators, gearboxes, and some of the bearings from government-approved domestic suppliers. Now, I talked about this in Newsflash a couple of days ago, but more information is coming out as we learn about it. The rules also mandate that all turbine performance and operational data must be stored on servers within India, prohibiting real-time data transfers abroad. So that forces, Phil, remote operation centers to be within India. And they're also talking about research centers that they must be within the country also. So Suzlon couldn't have their research center in Pakistan. Not that that would happen, but they would have to have it in India.
But they actually have one in Germany, for those that don't know. And, there are several other Indian OEMs who have licensed technology from Western companies that you could argue that they would have to redomesticate, including, Adani Group, which licenses a wind turbine design from Wind to Energy based in Rostock, Germany. So you've got a situation there where what they're really trying to do is kind of curb the rise of the Chinese in the market. Because at the end of the day, what a lot of those things are geared towards is precluding China from just dumping goods into India. The data thing is interesting, though, because as you mentioned, they have to have everything kind of co-located within India, and that's to prevent the real-time data flowing back to China for these Chinese OEMs to be able to analyze it or, remote operate and control turbines from China. They want that within India so that the people who are performing those kind of remote, working in the remote operations center are, either Indian nationals or would be subject to Indian law.
I think there's something to be aware of here, though, too. And Phil, this is a much larger macro conversation. We've had this one before, but it's about protectionism and growth, because there has been countries that have been taken advantage of in history, and India is definitely one of them that has been taken advantage of in the past over the last 300 years. That we know that to be true. But sometimes when the pendulum swings and you start putting regulations and things like that, you can actually hurt yourself a little bit. And I'm just thinking about you talk about like wanting to preclude some of the Chinese involvement. Okay. But there's a lot of Western stuff there. There is, like, say, even in it, does it go this far? Envision. Envision has a presence in India big time. Envision's blades are designed in Boulder, Colorado, right? So does that affect that? And they're built, a lot of them are built by but LM has factories in India, so there's a little bit of a change there. We did see and I don't know if it's maybe leading up to this, Siemens Gamesa sold their services unit in India a couple 4, 5, 6 months ago. So maybe they heard some whisperings in the waiting in the wings going like, well, we're gonna have to relocate there anyways. We might as well sell this thing.
Well, they had to, but that was, yeah, your point is made, but yeah, the reality of this is what it does is it necessitates a CapEx investment in the country. And the only way that somebody justifies making a CapEx investment in the country, any country, it doesn't matter if it's India, Brazil, the US, anywhere, people need to see visibility to a return. This actually kind of ties into what we were talking about with the German offshore wind auction. Anybody that wants to invest money, they need to be given a certain amount of, even if you're not going to give them a guarantee, you have to give them a certain amount of credibility that they're going to get some kind of a return on the investment they're making, because you're asking people to spend hundreds of millions on domesticating production. If you want to create a domestic market, you still have to facilitate the technology transfer, the knowledge transfer, and the investment, the foreign investment that's necessarily going to facilitate that. If you don't have domestic companies that are competent enough and capable enough to build something themselves, whether it's wind turbines or solar or battery storage or whatever, then you're necessarily trying to attract that capability from someplace else.
I've watched this in oil and gas in Africa. oil and gas Africa early years, man, it came in and all of the majors came down there, Exxon, BP, Shell, but they came from abroad because the expertise was not in country to do it. And then once it was like kind of pseudo established, you saw all of these governments, which there's its own problem in government relations in Africa anyways. But you saw these governments set up all these barriers and these things to try to benefit for the people. Corruption got brought into it and all kinds of things. And after a while, a lot of these players, like you see over there, like you see small players and local players, you don't see Exxon and Chevron and stuff making big splashes down in Africa anymore. They're just not playing in it. They have their existing assets. They've sold a lot of them to smaller companies. They're running them. That's still being, and they've moved on. They're in Guyana. They're in Brazil because they don't have to deal with the stuff that they got barriers put in place over there.
What will Europe think about the India supply chain if it does get up and running to the level they want it to in relationship to leaving China and the components that come from China? Would India be that source then?
I think they kind of already are, aren't they? I mean, there's a lot of stuff comes from India.
A little bit, not as much as they want to be.
That's your next best option in terms of affordability, and certainly India wants to be a major export hub. But this whole concept of that they've put in place of Make in India is really to support their domestic growth and their domestic industry. Basically, if you're not already in India as a Western company or even a Chinese company, the barrier to entry in the market is going up. And as I mentioned, you're talking about hundreds of millions of dollars in CapEx investment. And the only way you're going to pull the trigger on that is if you're seeing $1 trillion return, because a lot of these companies want like at least a 5x multiple on whatever CapEx they're plunking down. Again, especially in this kind of an interest rate environment. Now, if interest rates go down, their threshold goes down.
Don't let blade damage catch you off guard. Eelogic's ping sensors detect issues before they become expensive, time-consuming problems. From ice buildup and lightning strikes to pitch misalignment and internal blade cracks, Eelogic's ping has you covered. Their cutting-edge sensors are easy to install, giving you the power to stop damage before it's too late. Visit eelogix-ping.com and take control of your turbine's health today. Well, over in Pennsylvania, a wind farm upgrade is demonstrating how renewable energy is responding to AI data center demands. Axis Renewables North America received over $158 million in financing to upgrade the Twin Ridges wind farm in Somerset County. I know where that is. Boosting capacity to 170 megawatts. That's a 30% capacity increase, and comes as data centers nationwide are looking for power. And that tends to be the area where a lot of data centers are located or will be located. President Trump was just there in Pennsylvania and said wind energy in particular is not going to power these data centers, these AI centers. But that doesn't seem to be stopping anybody. Axis Renewables CEO Jim Spencer reports strong demand from data centers across North America for wind and solar power. So even if President Trump is in the neighborhood complaining about wind turbines, what is actually happening on the ground is wind and solar are going to be powering a lot of those data centers because it's lower cost and easier to install.
Well, and it's available electrons. I mean, at the end of the day, do you really care what electrons are feeding, your refrigerator?
At the end of the day, this is just going to be business cases are going to win out, right? You want an AI data center online? You need power? Where are you going to get it? So your business case is like, do you want it built in the next 6 to 9 months, or do you want to wait 5 years? Okay, business case wins out. We want it now.
You'd be lucky to get it in 2031.
We're going to have a nuclear power station on the moon before we get gas-powered, AI data centers.
Why are we doing that? Why are we spending money for nuclear power on the moon?
Space race, Alan.
Space race with whom?
China.
Because China's going to put a nuclear reactor on the moon? Is that what's going to happen?
Maybe we'll figure out how to beam it back, shoot electrons through vacuum space back to Earth or something.
But it actually, let's tie this back in, because that's kind of the point. You can say that you're going to go build something, and it might be a pie in the sky thing, but you're going to be out of office by the time somebody wants to even start building that. Because once you've figured out all the technical requirements to be able to even go do that, the administration is going to change, and then that's just going to be on the scrap heap. So it's the same thing. It's like, like Joel just said, you want your power and you want it fast. You're going to go with wind and solar. You're going to go with whatever electrons are available to you. You're not going to be picky, and you're not going to wait 6 or 7 years for gas.
Yeah, but when we're talking gas plants for 5, 6, 7 years down the line, we're talking about these big GE, big, like the 500 megawatt machines, right?
Yeah, the 9 series. I
read an article the other day about a data center in, I think it was Ohio, Alan. We've been talking a lot about data centers in Ohio lately, on and off air. But I think it was in Ohio, and it was fired by like 28 of these little gas turbines. Like they were little ones, right? They were little, like the size. Like I saw the picture. It was like a drone flying over, and like each of these little gas turbines was like the size of my pickup. Where are those coming from?
A DIY project?
No, they were bigger than that. They weren't a Generac. It wasn't a Honda Whisper Quiet. Yeah,
they're aeroderivative generators.
So who's building those? What's the capacity on those? Like, where is that going to be a thing?
GE builds those, and Siemens.
So you can get those. What's the timeline on one of them? What's the wait time on the queue list for that?
It's shorter than, the bigger units, like a GE, 7FA or 7F whatever now, or a 9FA or 9F whatever now. Those are the ones that are like 5, 6 years, wait list. The aeroderivative engines are cheaper, less complex, easier to make and faster to deploy. But then we get into the same, Joel, like if you were going to build a wind farm, do you build it with one, 5 megawatt turbine, or do you build it with, 25, kilowatt size things?
But I think you're up against the supply chain problem, right? So like if you want to do this quick, like you can do that, but at the end of the day, does it make sense, or should you just okay, in Ohio, there's not a whole lot of wind farms, right? There's not a lot of wind resource. So if you're going to build them there, you need some kind of power.
But also the reason why we chase economies of scale in wind energy with turbine size is that it's less footprint and less to maintain. It's a single point of failure, so you need higher reliability with the one turbine instead of 25 smaller turbines. But you're talking about the trade-off between redundancy versus O&M complexity and cost.
Well, I completely agree with you, but I'm just thinking at the end of the day, where the majority of data centers are going in the United States, Virginia, that kind of place, like Ohio, you need power. Your option right now is like solar and batteries over there, right? Or aeroderivative engines, where you're going to be burning fuel like a bastard. Do they sound like an airplane?
Sort of, yeah. They're loud. They're all loud anyway.
Yeah, that's true.
That's how they came into being. Was they basically adapted an aircraft engine for power static land-based power generation use.
Well, speaking of Ohio's Orphan well program has dramatically increased its cleanup efforts from our friends over in the oil and gas business. There are a lot of abandoned wells in Ohio, and in the last 5 years, they plugged about 1,200 holes from oil and gas, and about 2,300 since 1977. So every year, Ohio is plugging several hundred oil and gas holes. And Joel, I guess I didn't think of Ohio as an oil and gas center. If you move a little bit to the east, Pennsylvania, obviously oil and gas central for a long time in the United States. But there's a lot of abandoned oil and gas wells in Ohio, to the point where they received about $80 million in federal funding from the bipartisan infrastructure law, with up to about $300 million available through 2030 to help fill some of these wells. And they're still looking for them because they're long abandoned. They could be under buildings. They could be covered with trees. At this point, who knows where they are except from the emissions? That's the only way they're going to be able to find them.
Yeah, the trouble here, and this is something that a lot of people don't think about. So Ohio is on the edge of the Marcellus Shale, right? It's the same shale play that's in West Virginia, Pennsylvania, southern New York. It's just that same edge, right? So when they found in the early ages of the United States, when we started getting petroleum from onshore resources, Pennsylvania was ground zero and it kind of flowed over into there. So you end up with this situation where you have rugged, remote terrain, hills, tough to get to, where some of these wells are 100 years old, where there's no, there's terracotta pipe and stuff. Like, there's not good metal pipe in those things. So and they are leaking because they were not plugged right. The companies have dissolved. There's all kinds of stuff that's just gone, right? There's no records. We didn't do a good job of record keeping in the early days. So how you find most of these is there's a two-stage approach. You can look at classical maps and stuff, but that's only going to get you so far. But you look at satellite imagery for methane gas detection, and you can find methane gas plumes from satellite imagery. The U.S. government can, and they'll get you narrowed down to like depending on how bad the plume is, a 1 to 40 acre chunk. Then you take a drone that has a methane sniffer on it, and you fly around with the methane sniffer until you kind of narrow in on the plume. Then you use a metal detector and you find the area. That's time consuming, right? But the risk reward here is, and this is what people don't understand, when we talk about why we're plugging these wells, it's because we're plugging them to get rid of greenhouse gases. Greenhouse gases leaked into the environment, climate change, all this bad stuff, right? So we always think about CO2. But what's coming out of these wells, because of the way that oil and gas wells work, they are co-located with natural gas and coal bed methane. When methane leaks out of the ground, methane comes out of the ground, and it's about 30 times worse than CO2. 30 times worse than CO2 per unit as a greenhouse gas for atmospheric problems.
And when we deorbit that satellite that tracks the methane emissions, I think it's going to make things a lot harder to do.
Are we doing that, Phil?
Apparently. I mean, that was one of the other little rants that he went on the other day. He was like, we're going to blow up this satellite that's for tracking climate change, but it's actually tracking like the methane emissions from oil and gas.
I thought Google posted those emissions, right? Didn't Google open up the satellite imagery to see where methane, or as Rosie calls it, methane, originated from?
CH4+. I know that there's resources online where you can go look. And why I know that is because I was actually a part of a research project that was a really cool laser interferometer on a fixed-wing drone to find methane concentrations and then automatically map them with a fixed-wing drone down to the source. And while we were in the middle of that project is when the government released the ability for this satellite to do it. And I was like, well, there goes that. We don't need this thing anymore.
Well, why wouldn't these billion-dollar oil and gas companies take responsibility for the holes they previously dug? Or at least be responsible and say, all right, there's some abandoned wells in my general vicinity. Why wouldn't I plug those as a service to humanity?
I think there is a few players that do that, but the government, because they're not forced to do it, they're not spending the money outrightly, right? There is a couple of grassroots organizations. There's one up in Montana, I can't remember the name of it, that has taken this on, and they will take donations from some of these oil and gas companies. They're like, we're doing good and we're plugging these wells, and this guy and his team goes and does it. But I mean, you can't put a dent in what's out there.
Well, just think about the Ohio numbers. $82 million is plugged about 1,200 wells. So do the math. It's not that much money per well. I think, pick your oil and gas company throwing $80 million to help a state out plug these wells is nothing. It's a drop in the bucket.
That's how much money in federal funding they've received. It costs way more than $82 million to plug 1,200 wells.
Right, but you see what was done, though, right? I assume the state of Ohio is pitching in a bunch of money to do this also. But I don't understand if oil and gas is going to be the responsible party, why they're not responsible for the cleanup of the things they've left behind and on purpose bankrupt and LLC'd and buried.
Yeah, and I think for the most part, like the players that have control or did this, it's a lot of Permian awesome cat drilling company. Like, it's not Chevron and BP, right? It's
sure, but eventually those wells ended up in a bigger player. They all do at some point, unless they're completely dry. Super frustrating watching that go on.
This week's wind farm of the week is Rivière-du-Moulin in Quebec. I probably got that wrong. Sorry to my EDF friends up there in Canada. But this wind farm is near the town of Saguenay and Charlevoix in Saguenay-Lac-Saint-Jean in northern Quebec. So this wind farm, it was 2 phases, 2014 and 2015, phase 1 and phase 2, built by EDF. And at the time, biggest wind farm in Canada and one of the largest in the United States. It was 175 GE 2.0 107 meter rotor machines, which you don't hear about that often. So this was, again, built by EDF, and it's an interesting project because it was built across rugged terrain. I've actually driven through this wind farm, and it is timber, it is hills, it's beautiful. It's beautiful country, but to be thinking about that project and how they built it, amazing. So they did, this is cold climate, right? So GE put all the turbines are equipped with low temperature packages reliable for operation in Quebec winters, including ice detection and icing systems and de-icing systems. So that being said, we are having a webinar shortly, I think in the next few weeks. Correct me if I'm wrong, Alan, about de-icing systems?
Yes, we are with the Illogic Ping.
All right. So in other interesting things about this wind farm, the extensive wildlife studies, because this is, I think, one of the only wind farms I know of that had a caribou migration path through the middle of it. So they not only monitored that for before construction, but they're monitoring it through construction to make sure that they don't affect any of those local populations of animals. But despite remote access and severe winters, proactive O&M planning, all the way to down to crazy things like specialized vehicles and track vehicles and covers over the top of trucks to watch for falling ice and using helicopters for inspections and access. Really, really neat O&M planning up there. This wind farm actually has a really high availability rate. So the Rivière-du-Moulin is a rare combination of large-scale engineering complexity and ecological responsibility. Congrats to our friends up at EDF in Quebec. You are the wind farm of the week.
Well, that wraps up another episode of the Uptime Wind Energy Podcast. Thanks for joining us as we explore the latest in wind energy technology and industry insights. And if today's discussion has sparked any question or ideas, we'd love to hear from you. Just reach out to us on LinkedIn, and we're always on LinkedIn. And don't forget to subscribe so you never miss an episode. And if you found value in today's conversation, please leave us a review. It really helps other wind energy professionals discover the show. So we'll catch you here next week on the Uptime Wind Energy Podcast.